It's great to be here, and I'm really thankful for the invitation, even though I'm like Mark Twain, just an ordinary gal from another town or another country. I would like to start to congratulate you, Alice Munro in Canada. Isn't that a career to learn something from? We were surprised in Sweden to find it was an author that we had heard of. They never be that. Usually, standing at the podium, I base my presentations on the experience from hundreds or thousands of patients in a study. And today I realized I was going to rely on one single study object, myself. What kind of selection bias is that? I'm going to mix my history with a very brief orthopedic history, and in order to keep you awake, there will be some keywords to look out for, and in the end, something about hip fractures as well. I was lucky to have supportive parents. They told me, they helped me to build self-esteem, and they said, we expect you to study, but you decide yourself what your future field will be. In those dark ages, medicine was mainly run by aged males, and as you are workers of the great McMaster's University, you know everything about evidence-based medicine and its alternatives, of course. You can read to yourself about the halo effect of the eminence. Those were the days. Being a competitive swimmer and a student teach me to use my time efficiently, and of course fed a competitive strive as well. In the same period, there were comparative clinical studies being done amongst orthopedic colleagues. After some doubts what actually to study, I qualified for med school. And in the same period of time, the orthopods began to do randomized trials, not so very long time ago. Being a clinical working doctor, I couldn't see myself as a researcher, even though I was really trying to be a real doctor, a proper doctor. But I was confused to find that there were different treatment rationales between the two rural hospitals where I worked. They were just 80 kilometers apart, but they couldn't agree on what was the best treatment for femoral neck fractures. And I was frustrated that no one could tell me which was the best method. And in the big world, there were an urge to sort things out as well. Mid-90, I got a residency at the university hospital in my hometown, and I was hoping to raise a family. It's an awful picture. I knew that I had to assert myself in order to get accepted and get a permanent employment at that university hospital, and that would suddenly include research. And actually, out of mere coincidence, I was asked to run this large RCT as a PhD student. This was luck. I spoke with my tutor the other day. Why did you ask me? I don't know, he said. You were there. Once again, I was confused. I couldn't see a path through this jungle that lies ahead of me. And my tutor, he wasn't very attentive. I think it's just when you look back that you can see the path that you have been traveling on. This is important. And why hip fractures? Besides the obvious reasons, this is such a big problem and there's so much more to do. This is really a wonderful group of patients to work with. In the end of our residency, there were a conflict between the board of the department and us regarding our training. And we were 3 persons who spoke out on behalf of the group. And it ended up that we were individually admonished by the board for that. And the first guy, he was told that he was obviously stressed by his age because he was a bit older than us, facing a shorter career. Me, they treated as a woman on the edge of a nervous breakdown because they knew I had a late miscarriage just a few months earlier. And I was really offended, trying to explain that I could act and think perfectly well regardless of that. And the third guy, they couldn't find any other flaw with him than to say, well, you're not a guy one takes a whiskey with. So luckily, the 3 of us sat down, we spoke, we saw the pattern, that we were being criticized on a personal level in a formal debate. And there's much more to say about master suppressions technique, and you have to identify them when you see them. On the bright side, my first paper was published, and the second son was finally born. This really added to my experience of life. And this was very stressful years because besides having small kids, that conflict left me with a feeling of not belonging to the group, being different. And one day, I sat on the bus and I started to sum up what have I actually achieved during those first 10 years. And I found that it was good enough. And that was really a turning point, because there will always be someone else there to criticize you. So you really have to be kind to yourself during your career and be fair to yourself. So after that, I worked with my thesis more and more intense, and in 2003, I defended it at the dissertation. And this achievement really gave me more confidence, even as a clinical surgeon, even though I was the same surgeon the day before than the day after. But you know that you can do something and you will learn from it. And in the same year, finally, orthopedic community realized the real value in evidence-based medicine, thanks to you people here at MacMaster. So it was a good year. The year after, I was recruited to the Swedish Hip Arthroplasty Register as a national project leader. Luck, I think, but perhaps a bit more. Perhaps a good reputation was evolving. What was extremely lucky was the birth of a third son. So, since then, I have had the opportunity to go on working with both research and clinical work to improve hip fracture care, to tutoring PhD students, having more and more papers published, and spreading the word, going to meeting interesting people, making friends, and being helpful to introduce national quality register data as a scientific source as well, in addition to our randomized clinical trials. And now you have seen several of my keywords, and here is, I guess, the most important one. In order to keep things together as a parent, you have to have family support. You have to have a nanny, a granny, or if lucky, yet another granny, or a grandpa, of course, or a good nanny. You have to feel secure when you are at work. So to summarize the key words that I have experienced is, of course, that hard work is the cornerstone. But if you have a sense of structure and perhaps support from your extended family, then the hard work would be a little bit easier. If you are driven by your curiosity, then I think it's easier for you to see the joy and the fun in your research work. And you have to have that luck. You have to have that timing to be the right person in the right time, in the right place. But it's just a little part of it. I think it's important to know why you are doing your research, because we can have so many motives for that. And not all of them are altruistic, of course. You have to act confident, but you should ask for and accept help. And I'm really poor at this. I do a lot of work myself that I should ask someone else to do. So you have to work with all your personality in this. You should always say yes. We heard before that you shouldn't take no for an answer, but you should always say yes. You don't realize how many projects that never will be realized, but still you stood forward as a willing, optimistic person. Or that yes could be the golden opportunity for you. Or if you finally find yourself tangled up in something that you really don't want to do, then it's time for excuses or maybe a little white lie. Finally, you can afford to say no. You will find out when. Remember that everyone has a weak spot. Don't let your weak spot define you. You are not just that female person in orthopedics or whatever defines you as your weak spot. You are so much more. You are you. Regarding experience of life, remember that being a parent or being a friend makes you much more a wiser person, and you will benefit from that in your professional life as well. You cannot have it all. We have already heard something about sacrifices here. Remember that everybody, how successful they might look, have made sacrifices. And don't take yourself too seriously, and be kind to yourself. And as we all know, it's those really large efforts that will lead to large changes or progress. It is hard work, but you will get something in the end from it. So this is how I found out, thanks to Mo, trying to write it down. This is how I've done it so far, and I would just show you a few slides what I have done so far. Sweden, Scandinavia, a very exotic part of the world. For instance, there were those grey eminences. No, actually, they were doing clinical studies in the 80s, suggesting that internal fixation was the way to go for displaced femoral neck fractures. It was only 3 quite small studies. And then we had a hip fracture register which didn't work very well. So when